right, I'm going to try to just trust that God will speak through me and guide me and help me to speak, or help me to communicate this clearly. Recently, God gave me a picture of what it looks like to completely live from a place of trust. Can you imagine if Moses would have walked up to the Red Sea with all of the Israelites with him, thousands and thousands of people? He was leading out of Egypt with the Egyptian army at their backs coming after them. Can you imagine if he would have walked up to the Red Sea and instead of trusting God after all of that, jumped in and hurriedly, in a panic, tried to swim in his own strength? Can you imagine if he would have led all of the Israelites through the Red Sea and said, okay, guys, I hope you can swim, and then led them out by swimming, trying to cross the Red Sea in their own strength? He would have probably tried to have rescue everyone around him, and if he saw someone struggling, maybe try to carry them and then swim, and he probably would have drowned. And a lot of them, most of them, if not all of them, would have drowned if they would have tried to escape in their own strength. But instead, Moses, after 40 years of living as a foreigner in exile, he walks up to the Red Sea and dips his toes in the water, right? Let's look at exactly what it says here. See if I can find it. All right, so they're at the Red Sea, and the Egyptian army is at their back. Exodus 14. Verse 13, we'll start here. Moses answered the people, "Stop being so fearful, remain steady, and you will see how the Lord is going to save you. He will do it today. Today you have seen the Egyptians, but you will never see them again. The Lord will do battle for you. Just calm yourselves down." The Lord asked Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift your staff, reach out with your hand over the sea, and divide it in two. The people of Israel will advance into the sea on dry ground. As for me, I will make the Egyptians hard-hearted, and they will march in after them. Thus I will win glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and all his armies, chariots, and cavalry. Then the Egyptians will realize that I am the Lord, when I have won myself glory at the expense of Pharaoh, his chariots, and his cavalry." Next, the angel of the Lord, the angel of God, who was going ahead of the camp of Israel, moved away and went ahead of them, and the columns of cloud moved away from in front of them and stood behind them. It stationed itself between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was cloud and darkness, but light by night there, so that the one did not come near the other all night long. Moses reached his hand out over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back before a strong east wind all night. He made the sea become dry land, and its water was divided in two. Moses reached his hand out over the sea, and he also told, he didn't hurriedly, filled with panic, just jump into the Red Sea and just start hurrying along because he was scared. And no, he had enough time to tell the Israelites to calm down, to remain steady. The Lord will do battle for us. Just calm yourselves down. And then enough time to hear the Lord say, lift your staff and reach out with your hand over the sea and divide it in two. This is huge because over those 40 years of him living in exile, and then the encounter that he had with the Lord through the angel of the Lord that was within the burning bush, telling him to go and, building his trust up and ministering to Moses, saying, I will speak through you. I will do it through you. Just go, basically. Throughout all that time, God was sanctifying him. He was transforming his inner man. Because before that, if you remember, he tried to do everything in his own strength. I mean, when he would see his brothers, his kinsmen, get beat down and taken advantage of, he struck an Egyptian down. He killed a man. And then when he would see his own brothers, his kinsmen and the Israelites fighting each other, he would try to separate them and say, why are you guys trying to hurt yourself? He was trying to be fixer in his own strength. Are you trying to be fixer in your own strength? This is something that I have struggled with for years and years and years, trying to fix people or fix situations in my own strength. And God has had to lead me far away from family and from friends, and to lead my husband and I far away from the familiar, to a place where I have really felt like a foreigner in a foreign land. I have felt like I've been in a wilderness season, and God's just been showing me that sometimes for us fixers out there, us people who really struggle with that, who kind of take, the weight of the world on their shoulders, who just have that instinct to do that, sometimes God has to separate us and to teach us and sanctify us and put us through a process where our trust in the Lord is built up, so that when it is time, when it is the appointed time for God to send us to, be his hands and feet to whatever he's called us to do, whether it's to deliver or rescue or, because, sometimes he does call us to defend others, but he wants us to do it in his strength, in his timing, under his instruction, by his Spirit, to be filled with his Spirit and led by his Spirit in such a way that we are operating in trust, to where when it is our time to walk up to that Red Sea, we won't try to jump in and swim and carry everyone else around us and try to rescue them and swim in our own strength, that we will have enough trust to walk up to that Red Sea, to lift our hands over the Red Sea, to lift that staff over the Red Sea and divide it in two. Again, we're not doing that. God is doing that, but under his instruction and led by his Spirit, and operating in his trust so that he will get the glory. If Moses would have tried to do it in his own strength, he maybe would have saved a lot less people, right? He would have rescued a lot less people. I mean, that one Egyptian that he struck down, he only rescued that Israelite for maybe, I don't know, a couple of days, until the next Egyptian came along and beat him down again because they were slaves. So if Moses would have tried to operate in his own strength, the impact would have been way less. And people wouldn't have been talking thousands of years later about the time that, Moses led the Israelites out from Egypt, out from slavery, walked through the Red Sea, and then eventually into the Promised Land. No, maybe it would have been recorded still recorded, but it would have been just, hey, Moses, within his own reach, within his own strength, rescued a few. So don't you want your story to give God glory, and our impact and our impact to be much greater, so that when it is the appointed time for the fixing, for the saving, for the rescuing, it'll be God doing it, and we'll just merely be just a conduit of that, just a vessel, a willing vessel that is under his instruction, his spirit, and the impact will be exponentially, infinitely greater because it's God doing the work. Just want to share that. And I love this part of Hebrews. It's Hebrews 11. It's so powerful. So I'm just going to end this video with that. What is the impact of living from a place of trust? Abiding in Christ in trust, living in trust, making decisions in trust, consulting God in trust, helping others in trust. What does that look like? What's the impact of it? Here's just a few examples. By trusting, Abraham, when he was put to the test, offered up Isaac as a sacrifice. Yes, he offered up his only son, he who had received the promises, to whom it had been said, what is called your seed will be in Isaac. For he had concluded that God could even raise people from the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did so receive him. By trusting, Isaac, in his blessings over Jacob and Esau, made reference to events yet to come. By trusting, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons, leaning on his walking stick as he bowed in prayer. By trusting, Joseph, near the end of his life, remembered about the exodus of the people of Israel and gave instructions about what to do with his bones. By trusting, the parents of Moses hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he was a beautiful child and they weren't afraid of the king's decree. By trusting, Moses, after he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose being mistreated along with God's people rather than enjoying the passing pleasures of sin. He had come to regard abuse suffered on behalf of the Messiah as greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he kept his eyes fixed on his reward. By trusting, he left Egypt. Not fearing the king's anger, he persevered as one who sees the unseen. By trusting, he obeyed the requirements for the Passover, including the smearing of the blood so that the destroyer of his firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By trusting, they walked through the Red Sea as through dry land. When the Egyptians tried to do it, the sea swallowed them up. By trusting, the walls of Jericho fell down after the people had marched around them for 7 days. By trusting, Rahab the prostitute welcomed the spies and therefore did not die along with those who were disobedient. What more should I say? There isn't time to tell about Gideon and Barak and Samson, Yiftach, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through trusting conquered kingdoms, worked righteousness, received what was promised, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, had their weakness turned to strength, grew mighty in battle, and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead resurrected. Other people who were stretched on the rack and beaten to death, refusing to be ransomed so that they would gain a better resurrection. Others underwent the trials of being mocked and whipped, then chained and imprisoned. They were stoned, sawed in two, murdered by the sword. They went about clothed in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, mistreated, wandering about in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. The world was not worthy of them. All of these have their merit attested because of their trusting. Nevertheless, they did not receive what had been promised because God had planned something better that would involve us, so that only with us would they be brought to the goal. Okay, and we know that Jesus is the initiator and completer of our trusting, who in exchange for obtaining the joy set before him endured execution on a stake as a criminal, scorning the shame, and has been sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So Sometimes the promises of God are for now. Sometimes they're for tomorrow. Sometimes they're for 10 years from now. Or sometimes they're for when we reach those pearly gates on the other side, when we're, transformed into the fullness of glory in Jesus' presence. Sometimes those promises include stories much, much bigger than just ours. They include generations, and they take generations for them to be completed. So I just want to encourage all of you guys to live from a place of trusting, to trust God. And don't try to do it from your own strength. His strength is made perfect in our weakness so that he may receive the glory and not us. And the impact will be far much greater. So, and for those of you that are currently in a place where you're living in what feels like a foreign land, or some of you might literally be living in a foreign land, but I just want you guys to be encouraged that the wilderness, that the foreign land is for but a season. And I don't know how long that season's going to be. It could be a day, it could be a month, it could be years. But eventually, and only God knows the timeline, but eventually we will be led into the promised land. And we'll have that burning bush moment where the appointed time will be just completely revealed. And it will be so clear. So, all right, I hope this encourages you guys. And yeah, have a good night.